The same place they laughed at you is the place where God will lift you so high they won't be able to look you in the eye. There are moments in life that strip you bare, moments when the whispers of others become daggers in your back, when the laughter behind your name becomes a storm in your heart, and the weight of disgrace feels heavier than you can carry. You've stood in rooms where eyes avoided yours, not out of kindness, but out of judgment. You've walked streets where your presence felt like a shadow of mockery, and in those silent nights, when the world closed its doors, you cried to a God who seemed far away, asking why he allowed such shame to drape itself over your life like an unwanted cloak. But what if the humiliation you suffered was not the end of your story, but the beginning of God's rewriting of it? What if the very ground where you were shamed, because the very place God will raise you up? Have you considered that God's greatest works are often birthed in the soil of public defeat? Remember the stories of the broken who were made whole again. Joseph, thrown into a pit by his brothers and sold into slavery, humiliated in chains, accused of crimes he never committed, yet lifted to a throne where even his enemies bowed before him. David, mocked as a shepherd boy unfit for battle, yet crowned as king before the same people who once doubted him. The God of restoration does not just remove your shame. He turns it into a testimony that silences every tongue that mocked you. Humiliation is not simply an emotion. It is a refining fire. It burns away pride, it reveals the weakness of human applause, and it teaches you to lean on a foundation that no man can shake. And when God restores you, he does not restore you quietly. He does it in such a way that those who once ridiculed you must witness the glory he places upon your life. So take heart. The same God who saw you in your lowest moment, who heard the ridicule, who felt the sting of every insult, is the same God preparing to lift your head high. And when he does, your restoration will not only surprise those around you, it will shock even you. There is a strange paradox in the way God works, a way that seems upside down to the human mind. We think honor comes by being noticed, praised and lifted up in front of others. We think the path to greatness is paved with applause and recognition. But in God's kingdom, the road to honor often begins in the valley of humiliation. This is not because God delights in your shame, but because he knows the power of humility to prepare your spirit for something greater than you could handle without it. When you are humiliated, when your name is dragged through the mud, when people reduce you to your mistakes or fabricate lies to ruin you, it is then that something profound happens. You are stripped of the illusion that people's approval is your foundation. You realize that the voices that once cheered for you can, in a moment, turn against you. And in that realization, God begins to build within you a new anchor, one that is rooted not in the shifting opinions of man, but in the unchanging truth of his word. Joseph's life is the perfect picture of this truth. He did not step into the palace from a place of comfort. He was pushed there by the cruelty of others. His brothers hated him for his dreams, stripped him of his robe and threw him into a pit. They believed they were destroying him. In truth, they were unknowingly placing him on the first step toward his destiny. When Joseph was later sold into slavery, when he was falsely accused and thrown into prison, the humiliation he endured looked like failure. Yet every step downward was actually a step forward, because it was positioning him exactly where God needed him to be. This is how God works. The humiliation that others use to bury you becomes the very soil in which he plants you. They think they are ending your influence, but they are only removing the shallow foundation so he can give you a deeper one. Sometimes God allows the ground beneath you to crumble because He knows you are meant to stand on something higher. Think about David, dismissed by his own father when Samuel came to anoint a king. His father didn't even consider him worthy of the gathering. Imagine the humiliation of knowing that when greatness was being discussed in your house, your name wasn't even mentioned. But it was in that moment of rejection that God set David apart. While others were parading themselves before the prophet, David was in the fields, learning how to worship, how to fight lions and bears, and how to hear the voice of God. His humiliation was not a detour, it was the preparation for his throne. When you are positioned by humiliation, something else happens. You lose the fear of man. Once you have been publicly broken, you are no longer desperate for public approval. This makes you dangerous in the best way, because you cannot be manipulated by the same people who once tried to define you. You become free to walk in obedience to God without worrying about who approves or disapproves. In truth, humiliation is often the disguise of divine promotion. God allows you to be underestimated so that when He lifts you, it is clear that the power was never yours. This way, when your story is told, people will not see your skill, they will see His hand. There are wounds the world cannot see. You can sit among people, smile at them, even laugh at the right moments, while inside you are bleeding from words that cut deeper than any knife. Humiliation often hides itself in the quiet moments, when you lie in bed replaying what was said about you, when you walk past those who have mocked you and feel their eyes piercing your back, when you force yourself to keep moving, even though your soul feels heavy with shame. These moments may go unnoticed by others, but not by God. The scriptures tell us something extraordinary in Psalm 56:8, that God collects your tears in His bottle. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is divine assurance that not a single moment of your pain escapes His notice. Every tear that has fallen in the dark, every sigh you've breathed when no one was around, every prayer you've whispered without words, He has recorded them all. When humiliation strikes, people may treat it as a small thing. They may tell you to just move on, not understanding that some wounds are not easily brushed aside. But God's response is different. He does not minimize your pain. He does not tell you to get over it. He sits with you in it. He feels the weight of it with you, and He writes it down, not so He can dwell on your sorrow, but so He can one day bring justice for every ounce of it. Think of Hannah in the temple, weeping silently as she prayed for a child while her rival mocked her. The priest didn't understand. He thought she was drunk. But God understood. Every tear Hannah shed became part of the record God was keeping. And when the appointed time came, her humiliation was reversed. Not in secret, but in a way that the same people who had mocked her had to witness her joy. God's record keeping is not like man's. Man may remember your failures, your mistakes, and your low moments, but God keeps a different kind of record. He remembers the nights you prayed when you could have given up. He remembers the times you forgave when you could have fought back. He remembers the way you chose faith when it would have been easier to walk away. These are the things He stores up, and in His time He rewards them openly. There is a powerful comfort in knowing that nothing you endure is unseen. Even when your humiliation feels like a private prison, you are not alone in it. The one who sees in secret is already planning the day when He will restore you publicly. The bottle of your tears is not a container of sorrow. It is an account of debt, and God intends to pay it back with interest. One of the most mysterious ways God works is that He often chooses to restore you in the very place where you were humiliated. We might think that He would remove us far from the scene of our pain, hide us from those who mocked us, and give us a fresh start somewhere new. But more often than not, his restoration is not about escape. It's about transformation in plain sight. He does not rebuild you in secret. He rebuilds you where your enemies can see it, so that his glory becomes undeniable. Psalm 23:5 says, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies." Notice the location, in the presence, not in their absence, not miles away where they never see you again. God sets the table right there, in the same place they once despised you. And this is not an act of cruelty toward them. It is an act of justice toward you. When you are restored in the same place you were shamed, the weight of what God has done becomes impossible to deny. Think of Joseph again. He did not become a ruler in a far-off land where no one knew his past. No, God lifted him up in Egypt, the very place where he had been chained and falsely accused. Imagine the faces of those who once thought he would die in prison, now forced to bow before him as governor. And now he was supposed to be written out. This is the way God redeems humiliation, by turning the scene of your defeat into the stage of your victory. The same people who saw you in your lowest state will see you clothed in honor. The same walls that once echoed with whispers about your shame will one day carry the sound of your praise. It's not just about proving your worth to others. It's about proving his faithfulness to you, because when God restores you in the same place, you learn something about him that you could not learn any other way. You realize that his power is not limited by your environment. He doesn't have to remove you from the place of your shame to change your story. He can cause rivers to flow in the desert. He can make the wilderness bloom. Sometimes this restoration will be so public that those who once mocked you will be forced to acknowledge your change. Not because you seek their approval, but because God's blessing on your life becomes too visible to ignore. And while some may still cling to their opinions, the undeniable truth will be that the one they look down on is now walking in a grace they cannot explain. This is why you should never despise the place of your humiliation. It may be the very soil of your miracle. You may feel trapped where you are, thinking nothing good can come from that place, but God has a way of turning barren ground into holy ground. The street you walk now with your head down could one day be the same street you walk with your head lifted high, not because people's opinions changed, but because God's hand changed your life. When you've been humiliated, when false accusations have stained your name, when lies have been spoken so often that they sound like truth to others, the desire for immediate vindication is strong. You want God to move now, to step in and clear your name, to expose the lies, to end the whispers. But God's timing is rarely immediate, and that can be one of the hardest parts of the journey. At first, his silence feels like abandonment. You wonder if he even cares, if he saw what happened, if he noticed how your reputation was shredded. But the delay is not neglect, it is strategy. God waits not because he is unwilling to defend you, but because he is setting the stage so that when he moves, there will be no doubt about who orchestrated your restoration. While hungry nations, if vindication comes too soon, your enemies can claim coincidence. They can say it was your effort, your connections, or just good luck. But when God waits until every human option has failed, until even you are unsure how things could ever be repaired, his intervention becomes undeniable. No one can take the credit. Think of Lazarus. Jesus could have healed him when he was sick, but instead, he waited until Lazarus was not just dead, but 4 days in the tomb. Why? Because in that culture, after 4 days, hope was considered gone. It was too late, unless God stepped in. When Jesus called Lazarus out of the grave, the miracle was so great that no one could deny the power behind it. In the same way, God may allow your humiliation to remain for a season because He is ensuring that when your honor is restored, it will silence every accuser. Not just quiet them for a moment, but remove their power to speak against you ever again. His timing exposes the lies for what they are, not just to you, but to everyone who heard them. And there is something else His timing accomplishes. It refines you. If restoration came too quickly, you might walk in pride or resentment. But the waiting season teaches you dependence, patience, and grace. You learn to trust His word above the noise. You learn to live without the constant need to defend yourself. By the time He restores you, your character will be strong enough to carry the blessing without it crushing you. God's timing is not just about your vindication. It's about the completeness of the work. When He moves, it will not just heal the wound, it will rewrite the story. Those who once believed the lies will have no choice but to see the truth. And those who were silent in your humiliation will witness the public declaration of your restoration. Pride is one of the most dangerous enemies of the human soul. It can hide itself so deeply that you may not even recognize it until it is exposed. Pride whispers that your worth is in what others think of you, that your identity is tied to your achievements, your status, your abilities, or your reputation. It feeds off applause and dies in silence. But humiliation, though painful, has a way of killing pride in a way nothing else can. When you face humiliation, the false supports you've leaned on are stripped away. The applause stops, the admiration fades, and you are left to face the truth about who you are without the masks. At first, this can feel devastating. But in the kingdom of God, what feels like devastation is often deliverance. God is not trying to destroy you. He is freeing you from the weight of pride that could destroy your future. Consider the Apostle Peter. Bold, confident, quick to declare his loyalty to Jesus, he could not imagine himself falling. But when the moment came, he denied the one he loved 3 times. The humiliation of that failure shattered the pride he carried. Yet it was in that brokenness that Jesus restored him, saying, "Feed my sheep." Peter went on to become one of the greatest leaders in the early church, not because of his pride, but because it had been replaced with humility and faith. Pride blinds you to your need for God. It convinces you that you can manage life on your own strength. But humiliation opens your eyes to the reality that without Him, you are nothing. And once you see this truth, your faith deepens. You stop placing your trust in your abilities, your resources, or your charm, and you start placing it solely in His power. When pride is broken, your prayers change. You stop praying only for outcomes that make you look good, and you start praying for outcomes that glorify Him. You stop asking God to keep you in places of comfort and start asking Him to place you where you can grow, even if it's hard. Your faith is no longer built on the shaky foundation of people's approval. It is built on the solid rock of God's promises. Humiliation also teaches you compassion. Once you have been in the place of being misunderstood, judged unfairly, or looked down upon, you begin to see others differently. You are slower to judge, quicker to forgive, and more willing to extend grace. Your faith becomes practical, not just words, because you know what it is to depend on God when everything else is stripped away. And perhaps most importantly, when the power of pride is broken, God can trust you with greater things. He knows you will not take the credit for His work. He knows you will remember the pit you came from and give Him the glory when you are lifted up. He knows that the honor you receive will not become an idol, but a testimony. There is a pattern in Scripture that reveals the heart of God toward those who have suffered loss and humiliation. When He restores, He does not merely replace what was taken, He multiplies it. This is not symbolic language, it is the nature of His justice. He is not content to simply bring you back to where you were before. He moves you beyond it, so that the pain you endured becomes the seed of a greater blessing. Job's story is the most well-known example. In a single season, he lost his children, his wealth, his health, and his reputation. His friends accused him of hidden sin, his own wife urged him to curse God, and his name became a cautionary tale of tragedy. He sat in ashes, scraping his sores, with nothing left but his faith in God. Yet when his trial ended, God did not simply restore what Job had lost. He gave him twice as much as before. This is the principle of double restoration. It is God's way of declaring that the enemy's attacks will not leave you diminished. The time you spent in humiliation is not wasted. It becomes an investment that pays a return greater than what was lost. The shame you endured becomes the backdrop for an even greater glory. Isaiah 61:7 captures this promise. Instead of your shame, you will receive a double portion, and instead of disgrace, you will rejoice in your inheritance. And so you will inherit a double portion in your land, and everlasting joy will be yours. Notice the language, instead of. God is not adding blessing on top of shame, He is replacing it entirely. The disgrace that once defined you will no longer have a voice, because joy and honor will speak louder. This double restoration is not always material. It can be spiritual, emotional, and relational as well. Some who have been humiliated in love find themselves later surrounded by people who cherish them deeply. Some who have been crushed by betrayal find themselves blessed with a community more loyal and faithful than they could have imagined. Some who have been stripped of opportunity find themselves walking through doors so wide that the past feels like a shadow compared to the present. When God restores double, it is not because you deserve it. It is because He delights in showing mercy. His restoration is extravagant because He is extravagant in love. He wants the watching world to see that humiliation is not the end of His children, but the soil in which He grows something even greater. And here's the beauty of it. When you receive this double portion, you see your past differently. What once felt like wasted years now feels like the very reason you can appreciate the blessing. What once felt like unfair loss now feels like the preparation for something you could not have handled before. The humiliation does not disappear from memory, but it loses its sting because the glory God has placed in your life shines so brightly that it overshadows the pain. In life, human approval is as unstable as the wind. It changes with moods, circumstances, and convenience. One day you are celebrated, the next you are forgotten or even despised. Many people have learned the hard way that the ones who applaud you today may be the same ones who mock you tomorrow. This is why the lifting that comes from God is so radically different. When God Himself chooses to raise you up, it is not built on the shaky foundation of man's opinion. It is anchored in His eternal will. When you have walked through humiliation and God restores you, the promotion He gives is unlike any other. It is not a fragile recognition that can be taken away with a rumor or dismantled by envy. His elevation comes with divine protection. What He establishes cannot be overturned by human hands. Scripture says in Revelation 3:8, "See, I have placed before you an open door that no one can shut." When God opens that door for you, not even the combined efforts of your enemies can close it. This is why His restoration is so powerful. It is permanent. Those who once laughed at you may still try to undermine you, but their words will fall flat because they are speaking against what God Himself has ordained. Their opinions may circulate, but they will not hold weight in the face of His blessing on your life. Think about how the story of Joseph ended. When his brothers finally came before him, they were terrified that he would seek revenge. But Joseph understood something deeper, that his position was not a result of their approval or disapproval, but of God's sovereign plan. That understanding freed him from the need to defend himself or seek their acceptance. He could stand with his head held high, not because he had proven them wrong, but because God had proven Himself faithful. When God lifts you, your identity shifts. You are no longer defined by the moment of your humiliation, but by the testimony of His power in your life. Your worth is not tied to what was said about you, but to what He has declared over you. And because He is unchanging, that worth is unshakable. God. 6. You will also notice that when God raises you after humiliation, you walk differently, not with arrogance but with quiet strength. You no longer need to announce your worth or prove yourself to anyone. Your life becomes the proof. The blessing that surrounds you speaks louder than any defense you could make, and the peace you carry becomes untouchable, because it is rooted in the One who holds your future. This is why the lifting from God is so secure, because it is not just about changing your circumstances, it is about changing you. The trials you endured, the pain you survived, the shame you carried, all of it prepared you for a position you can now hold without fear of losing it. You have learned that your security is not in people's hands, but in God's. And once you know that, no one can take it from you. If humiliation has been your story, hear this: it is not your ending. Every tear you have shed, every whisper spoken against you, every moment you felt small in the eyes of others, God has seen it all, and He has not forgotten. You are not invisible to Him. You are not abandoned. You are not defined by the lowest chapter of your life. God is the master of reversals. He takes the ashes of shame and fashions them into crowns of honor. He takes the place where you were pushed down and turns it into the place where you stand tallest. He takes the words spoken to break you and transforms them into testimonies that build you. When He restores you, it will not be halfway, it will not be quiet, it will not be hidden. It will be done in such a way that even those who doubted you will have to admit His hand is on your life. And when He lifts you, you will not rise on the fragile wings of human approval, but on the unshakable foundation of His purpose. So if today you are walking through the valley of humiliation, lift your eyes. The same God who raised Joseph from the prison to the palace, the same God who took David from the fields to the throne, the same God who turned Hannah's tears into songs, He is your God, and His promise to you is this: I will end your humiliation and I will restore you. Walk forward with that hope, carry that truth in your heart, and know that your story is far from over. The author is still writing, and the next chapter will be your rising.